Heaven and hell. I mean, we use these words all the time, right? They're just everywhere in our culture, from movies to everyday phrases. But what if everything we think we know is kind of wrong? When you actually go back to the original source, the biblical texts, the picture of the afterlife is way more complex, more debated, and honestly, a lot more surprising than most of us realize.
So let's just dive right in. We're going to tackle this by looking at questions people are actually asking online, like this one right here. Is hell this place of eternal torture, or is it something else completely? We're going to use these questions as our guideposts, to try and figure out what the Bible actually says versus what we've just sort of picked up over the years.
Okay, so the first big thing you have to wrap your head around when it comes to hell is the word itself. See, in English, we've just got this one, single, super loaded word. But that one word is doing a ton of heavy lifting, because it's being used to translate several totally distinct and different concepts from the Bible's original languages.
And right away, you can see how this gets complicated. Here are the three main words from the original texts that all get smushed into our one English word, hell: Gehenna, Hades, and Tartarus. And this is super important. The biblical authors use these different words for a reason. They were not all talking about the exact same thing.
Let's just focus on the one Jesus himself used most often, Gehenna. And this is where it gets really wild. Gehenna wasn't some spooky, mythical underworld. It was a real, physical place. It was literally the city garbage dump outside Jerusalem, constantly smoldering. So think about that. When Jesus wanted a metaphor for final judgment, his go-to image was the city dump, a place of waste and final destruction.
All right, so once you untangle the language, you run headfirst into this huge ongoing debate among Christians about what final judgment actually looks like. And it pretty much boils down to three main competing theories. So this table breaks it down for us. First up, you've got eternal torment. That's the one most people think of. Then there's annihilationism, which is the idea that the wicked are eventually just destroyed. They cease to exist. And finally, you have universalism, the view that, in the end, everyone will be reconciled to God. And the really crucial thing to get here is that smart, sincere believers hold all three of these positions, and they all point to different parts of the Bible to back it up.
And just so you know, this isn't some new thing. People didn't just start arguing about this yesterday. This debate has been raging since the very beginning of the church. You had major thinkers like Gregory of Nyssa, who were Universalists, and at the same time, you had absolute heavyweights like Augustine making the case for eternal torment. This has been a core debate in Christian thought for like 2,000 years.
Okay, let's switch gears for a minute. Because just like our ideas about hell can be a little off, our whole pop culture image of heaven, the fluffy clouds, angels with harps, all that stuff, it's also a huge departure from what you actually read in the biblical texts.
Yeah, this slide really puts it side by side. On one side, you've got the cartoon version of heaven, but on the other, the biblical picture, it's way different. The whole focus isn't on leaving your body behind, it's on a physical resurrection, getting new souped-up bodies. And the ultimate destiny isn't some floaty cloud kingdom, it's a renewed physical heaven on earth, a place that sounds surprisingly tangible and real.
This quote from a biblical scholar really nails it. See, the core hope isn't about escaping the physical world. It's about that world being transformed and made new, starting with us and our own bodies. It's a totally different way of looking at it, and honestly, a much more grounded vision of what eternal life could be.
But of course, for a lot of people, the real issue with the whole idea of hell isn't about the details. It's about justice. It's a moral problem. And this brings us to probably the biggest, most powerful objection people have when it comes to Christianity.
And here's the question. How could a loving God justify an infinite punishment for sins committed in a finite lifetime? It just doesn't seem fair, right? It feels cruel. And believe me, theologians have been wrestling with this one for centuries, and they've come up with a few key ways to approach it.
Okay, so this slide breaks down one of the classic arguments. Let's walk through it. First, think about our own justice system. The time it takes to commit a crime has almost nothing to do with the length of the sentence, right? Second, it's about who you offend. The consequences for lying to your sister are a lot different than lying to the IRS. So the argument goes, a sin against an infinite God carries an infinite weight. But the third point is really the heart of it all, that the ultimate sin isn't any one thing you do, but the final total rejection of God himself.
And this brings us to a famous quote from C.S. Lewis that just captures this idea perfectly. The idea here is that God isn't like actively throwing people into hell. It's more that he finally and tragically gives people what they've chosen all along, a life without him.
So if you look at it this way, God isn't really sending anyone to hell. He's honoring their free choice to live apart from him.
The suffering then isn't some random punishment, it's just the natural, logical result of disconnecting yourself from the very source of all goodness and joy in the universe.
So where does all this leave us? Well, if you came here looking for one neat, final answer, I'm sorry to say you're not going to find it. The Bible gives us these incredibly powerful data points, images, warnings, promises, but it's not a detailed instruction manual for the afterlife.
All right, so let's do a quick recap of what we've covered. We've learned that that one little word, hell, is actually covering for a bunch of different concepts. We've seen that there are at least 3 major and totally competing Christian views on what damnation is. We've thrown out the whole clouds and harps idea of heaven for something much more physical. And we've dug into the really deep questions about justice and free will that are at the very center of this whole conversation.
And that leaves us with one final big idea to chew on. If you really take that idea seriously, that hell is ultimately a choice, it forces you to ask a pretty profound question. It moves the whole conversation away from some kind of cosmic courtroom and puts the focus right back on us. What does it really mean to be free? And what's the true weight of our decisions if they could have eternal consequences? It's a heavy one for sure, and definitely something to think about.